Fulbright Lotus and the Fulbright Association collaboration event. This is an interactive session about how to fight anti-Asian racism through film and television. A little bit about Fulbright Lotus. We got started in 2019 as a platform for Asian Fulbrighters, and we share a lot of events and resources, and we highlight a lot of the AAPI experience, and that's why we're co-hosting this event today with with Alexa Alice Jobin. Alexis Alice Jobin is a Fulbright alumni ambassador, and she teaches in the English department at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where she serves as the founding co-director of the Digital Humanities Institute. She writes about cultural globalization, Shakespeare, race, gender, in film and theater adaptations. Kindly let her take over and introduce us to the event today. Alexa, why don't you start?
Thank you. Thank you, Fan, and thank you, Fulbright Association and Fulbright Lotus. It's so wonderful to be with you this afternoon. I'm going to start with a little brainstorming word cloud, which is in the chat here. If you go to this link, you can enter as many words as you like. Just separate each keyword by commas, and we can collectively see how people describe anti-Asian racism in the United States, but also in other contexts. I will share live. I will share with you live the result as they evolve. And as you go to the link, you should be able to, it asks you to put in your name, but you don't have to put in any specific name or even your real name. So I'm going to share my screen as we brainstorm about this. So just whatever words, adjectives that come to your mind. Obviously, it's a heavy topic, but I think it's important to begin with some. Are people typing? Are you having difficulties by any chance? Yes. All right. So as you can see now on the screen, it is currently evolving. I understand it takes some time, which is fine. Continue to think and try to put in. Our topic obviously is film and television, but I wanted to point out a number of features and to start a brainstorm about why Americans have taken so long to speak up only after the tragedy in Atlanta. Thank you, Melissa. You can type that into the word cloud if you wish. And how have portrayals of the Asian community on media affect all of us? What can we do to fight racist misogyny? A lot of these are actually intersecting. And of course, the front and center is some kind of political invisibility of this group, right? Political invisibility of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders as a result, the invisibility as a result of underreporting of crimes, but also lack of solidarity. And even the word AAPI, I think, speaks strongly, because Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, wow, that's a very big group, right? And there are very few internal denominators among this group. So ranging from, for example, all the different languages and cultural heritage, it's very rich, but at the same time, I think it does pose some difficulty for political solidarity. If you think about Hispanics and Latinx, those tags are defined by geography, defined by language, for example, but AAPI isn't really defined by any commonality. So to stop AAPI hate, especially to combat anti-Asian racism in the wake of COVID, I think it's useful to think about widely circulating images and films that a lot of people come into contact with, but probably don't think more about. And I think that's really useful. So now it's time to look at our word cloud. What's so interesting here is that there's no one single word that really floats to the top, right? The more someone says, the more people who says the same word, the bigger the word would be. But what we are seeing here is actually quite a range. And I see the word foreign, for example. I thought that's really interesting. Because obviously immigration is very much tied to AAPI as a group. And that's not unique, but I think that's something that's an important indicator regarding AAPI. There are, as a group, probably there are more immigrants. There are second and third generation Asian Americans, but also at the same time, there's always the slur, for example, go back to where you come from, very often is applied to this particular group. And some of us have said ignorance, that's also up front and center. Maybe that's also a sign of, I think that's very charitable to say that the haters are ignorant. Maybe they're willfully ignorant, maybe they're twisting the facts, but whatever it is an important phenomenon there. And of course, prejudice, I think, is very much part of this. So if I were to ask you, so I stopped sharing this, since the clips we're about to watch, they are related. They very often portray racism and misogyny at the intersection. It's useful to then think about how people would describe misogyny. It's a form of sexism, right? Before we go there, I wanted to show you very briefly something that may be of interest. So. All right, so if you go to the same link that I gave you, which is this link, and now we are actually describing misogyny, so it's slightly different, but it looks, it's the same word cloud concept. And behind all this, I'll just say briefly, historically, there are two concepts that really intersect. It's kind of two sides of the same blade. One is yellow peril, so it's a racist construction of Asian Americans, particularly the immigrants. It uses a language of disease to talk about illness and unhygienic practices. And using those kind of words, that kind of language to describe Asian Americans, particularly in the early days, the railroad workers. And in association with that is yellow fever. And this refers to a kind of fetishization of women of Asian heritage. And what I hope to discover in this word cloud exercise is that maybe we'll see that these two operations, they intersect in some ways, they share some of the similar characteristics. Here, front and center, we have insecurity, right? So people who put women down, regardless of the race, tend to be insecure. I think that's a fair description, and it has to do with power dynamics. This group is underrepresented, and therefore they're more susceptible to this kind of bias. I also see anger, even though it's smaller here on our cloud, right? I think similar sentiments were expressed when we're describing racism, especially anti-Asian racism. There's this, it's a venting mechanism. It's scapegoating, targeting a group. I think like Melissa said in the chat, scapegoating is such a powerful but harmful social phenomenon. People always have to look for a scapegoat. And both racism and misogyny, as we see on the word clouds here, are motivated by hate, articulated in various ways. So I'm going to briefly stop here. And I wanted to show you two really interesting backgrounds, posters. I'm going to show them in the form of background behind me. So as we know, COVID really exacerbated anti-Asian racism that was already brewing in previous years. And due to the stay-at-home order, more people found time to tune in to social media to connect with like-minded individuals, but primarily, like we said before, for venting. And racist attitudes demonize a whole group of people based on their perceived social value. So this is obviously beyond skin deep. Racism takes the form of political marginalization of minority groups and cause emotional distress. The hatred online that I referred to then bled into real life. So every day we're seeing more and more irrational acts. Here's just one of the really striking posters. This is from Library of Congress, 1886. And this was an advertisement for a soap. The ad shows Uncle Sam holding a proclamation and a kind of magic washer. And he's kicking the Chinese out of the US. The caption says the Chinese must go. The implications are that the Chinese are the origin and carriers of virus and germs. Obviously, the pandemic and the use of face masks as a mitigation measure didn't help either, right? A lot of the haters turned it around and said that the Asians are now the Asians are the sources of the virus when they wear a mask. And so you can see how long the history really is. There's this long history of language of disease and illness, language that talk about in the film and TV, we're going to see the characters who are of foreign origin. So go back to where you come from. Now, in early 2020, to raise awareness of anti-Asian racism, Korean-Swedish cartoonist Lisa Woring-Strobom created this image as part of her series of one-panel comics. While wearing face masks is an effective public health measure, ironically, Asian Americans have become the scapegoat. A good hygienic practice was flipped and used in hate speech to frame Asian Americans as the perpetrators. So all of these panels, I was really struck by her work. Highly recommend. I encourage you to check out her work. I think it's very useful in all kinds of contexts. Since it's one panel, it's really easy to share with friends and on social media to raise awareness. I am going to share my slides. I thought it's useful to start with racism in general instead of specifically anti-Asian, so that we can kind of get a broader context of how race is portrayed in mainstream films. So the first one, there's no visual. This is deliberate.
It's him.
Ron, I don't share this with a lot of people.
Well, I'm anxious to meet you.
Excited to meet you too, Ron.
Aren't you ever concerned of some smart aleck nigger calling you pretending to be white?
No. I can always tell when I'm talking to a Negro.
How so?
Take you, for example, Ron.
Me?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell that you're a pure Aryan white man from the way you pronounce certain words.
It's him.
And now we have the visual.
Ron, I don't share this with a lot of people.
Well, I'm anxious to meet you.
Excited to meet you too, Ron.
Aren't you ever concerned of some smart aleck nigger calling you pretending to be white?
No. I can always tell when I'm talking to a Negro.
How so?
Take you, for example, Ron.
Me?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell that you're a pure Aryan white man from the way you pronounce certain words.
So for those of you who know the film, that's Black Klansman, obviously, and we have this black detective who goes undercover to infiltrate the KKK. He's speaking to the founder of KKK, who is so disillusioned, who's misguided by his obsession of racial pureness. that over the phone, he actually mischaracterizes his because I suppose an undercover black detective is so otherworldly that it never occurs to him. So the exercise here with listening to the conversation, just as the characters do, right, on the phone, no visual, versus when we have the visual and we get a different layer of the story and the parody and everything comes through, is very useful, right? Because we, no matter how woke we are, from time to time, we listen to race, we listen for race habitually without being aware of it. As we speak on the phone, as we encounter someone, you're already forming images of the person or the character, and that's called unconscious bias. Now, the theme here, of course, emerges repeatedly in a lot of films, namely accents. Accents that are different from the mainstream one. Everyone has accents, right? Even standard accent is an accent. And when a character has an accent that's not mainstream, there's always demonization is used as an excuse, as in the film Falling Down, directed by Schumacher.
Drink, 85 cents. You pay, I'll go.
What's a phi? I don't understand a phi. There's a V in the word. It's five. You don't got V's in China?
Not Chinese. I'm Korean.
Whatever. You come to my country, you take my money, you don't even have the grace to learn how to speak my language?
So not just demonization, but also confusion. Asian identities, Asian accents are interchangeable, and that's behind the operation of yellow fever as well. Asian women become interchangeable. Their individuality gets erased and it gets written over by the so-called Asianness, whatever that stands in the imagination of ideal femininity. I wanted to show a scene from a Canadian film where Sandra Oh's character is at an audition.
I'll read all the other lines.
All right.
And action.
I'd like a burger, hold the ketchup, and a side of fries and a Pepsi. What do you want? I'll have a spinach salad. And come on, you've got to eat more than that.
Anything to drink with that?
Yeah, I'll have a chocolate milkshake. Come on, honey, have something to drink at least. I'll have a Diet Pepsi.
Would you like gravy with your fries, sir?
Yeah, gravy would be good.
And cut. Nice. Very, very nice. So it's Jade, isn't it?
Yes.
Why don't we try something different this time? Something with a bit of swing.
Sure.
Good, okay. Try it with an accent.
What kind of accent do you want me to do? A Parisian accent? Excuse me. Yes, a very good Chinese accent I can do for you.
So I'm going to pause here. So this is our mini section all on accent, all of those. I would love to hear your thoughts. Just unmute yourself. Yes.
That was very uncomfortable for me to hear.
Yeah, and that's very deliberate, and that's why I thought this film is useful in raising awareness. You see Sandra Oh's character, her discomfort, and we connect to that. So, in what jumped out to you in all these clips about accents, about difference that somehow marked linguistically, sounding different, also sounding white, right? In the Black Klansman. Melissa, hey, thanks for coming.
Hey, yeah, that was a great clip in it, and that is something that gets replayed in movies over and over again. HBO,
and in real life, right?
Yeah, in real life and in
exactly.
film. In Coastal Elites, there's a Daniel Levy does a part of the Coastal Elites film where he's being asked to do the gay accent, right? And so this expectation of performing your identity category is it is obviously the desire to sort of maintain a status quo stereotype that people feel that they have control over, that they have mastery over. It's a way of enforcing mastery and again pigeonholing in a way that they feel superior to.
Yes.
So it kind of reminded me of like code switching also, and
Yes.
in my own experience and how I use my Asian accent, I tend to speak just like when I speak English, this is how I speak. But when I speak to my family and I use certain English words, I usually say it with an accent. And it's like as part of my Chinese sentence, I would be like, this is a word, and then and it like reminded me of how like I would code switch based on my situation. If you asked me to do it in Chinese accent when I'm speaking in English, I would be like, what? But it comes more naturally when I'm speaking with my family and I'm trying to relate to them somehow and make them understand English terms easier.
That is such a great point. And I think code switching is part of this. It's not always ugly. It can be empowering depending on how it is arranged in film, how it's used for political purposes in life, right? But to be asked to do the gay accent to sound white or not sound white, I think it is definitely something that we need to think about. So speaking of code switching, thank you, Ting, for chiming in. I have a clip. This is from Alice Wu's more recent film. It's called Saving Face. I'm not sure if you happen to know about it. It portrays a sham marriage because a lesbian cannot let her mom know of her sexual orientation. And here we go.
是啊，小鱼。
去看你外公外婆吗？
Yeah, weekly pilgrimage to Flushing to swim in the Chinese gene pool.
Good girl.
How come you never have to go?
我每星期5值夜班。
Lucky.
哎，这是我爸给你的。
他还在算命啊？
只要有那些操心的妈妈婆婆们，他的生意就绝跑不了。
What's this?
你妈要他替你配了些中药，改善你的气血，希望能帮你招点喜气来。
You've got to be kidding.
It's all natural, no side effects.
There's my train.
嘿，试试吧，反正对你身体有益无害。
So, Ting, what did you think? So that's a perfect example of code switching, and the two characters, they're each using a different language, primarily.
It reminds me of my interactions with my cousin, who's also like, we both speak mainly in English when we're alone, but then when we're in environment with my family, we would speak in Chinese with them. And then sometimes we would talk to each other in Chinese, but we still do English too, so my family can't understand us.
Yeah, and you spoke of, even if you speak English, you would try to add accent to the words to make them more intelligible in some way. And I think that's quite a common experience. In film, it could be used, code switching could be used as a tool for scapegoating or stereotyping. But I think what the scene really captures here, I need to do a bit of translation. When the uncle figure talks about the herb to fortify your prospect for marriage, it's a euphemism. What they're referring to, of course, is her for fertility, to be a better baby bearing factory, to enter into a heterosexual relationship, because the worry of the family is how come she doesn't have a boyfriend yet. But Anne Lee has a famous film, Wedding Banquet, and there is this hilarious scene involving miscommunication and the language barrier. But I think there are different ways to read that. Let me play that to you and let's see what you think.
You need to switch. You're on Now, if there's anyone here who can now show just cause why these two people may not be legally married, speak now, or else hereafter hold your peace. Good. Now repeat after me. I, Wei Tang.
Wei Tang.
Okay, take you, Wei Wei.
Wei Wei.
Okay, Wei, to be my wedded wife.
To be my wedded wife.
To have and to hold.
To have and to hold.
For better for worse.
For better for worse.
For richer for poor.
For richer for poor.
In sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
Till death do us part.
Till death do us part.
Good. Okay, now you. I, Wei Wei.
Wei Wei.
Take you, Wei Tang.
Wei Wei.
Okay, to be my wedded husband. To have and to hold.
Holding to have husband of my
For better for worse. For richer for poor.
better and richer. No, poor.
In sickness and in health till death do us part.
Till sickness and death.
Groovy. Rings. Under the authority vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce that you are husband and wife. You may kiss your bride.
So for those of you who don't know Wedding Banquet, the Taiwanese American character, he enters into this sham marriage to appease his parents, obviously. So it's a 1990s film. It's way before Brokeback Mountain. It's a queer film that really has gone mainstream and has flown under the radar for many. The comedy comes from the sham marriage for an audience of two. It's really for the parents that flew all the way from Taiwan to New York for this. And the girl coming from mainland China, she needs a green card. So she agrees to enter into this sham marriage as well, knowing that Wei Tang is actually gay. That could partially explain their unnaturalness, how uncomfortable they are in actually saying the vow. But I wonder, what is your read of this situation? Is it wrong of the male? I mean, it's an otherwise mundane city hall wedding, right? And it's a wedding scene we've seen before in other films. The ridiculous vow. Did anything else jump out to you? Or what did you find funny? Michael. Oh.
Hey,
Yeah,
there you go.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I mean, to me, I mean, a lot of the comedy, and again, I'm some, old white guy here. For me, a lot of the comedy comes from with the young Asian guy having to correct the white guy on all the pronunciations of the names, which is an expected thing. But then it's like on the other side, when it becomes clear to the officiator that the woman may not even necessarily understand everything he's saying. Now, there's a decision being made there. Do I let this go on or do I stop it? I mean, if you're saying, oh, well, no, she's being railroaded into this, she doesn't know what's going on, you gotta step in. He intentionally, time and time again, chooses to believe the positive in some way. And so that to me, there's an aspect of humor in that also, because in essence, he's putting his job on the line a little bit, but it's also part of the humor, I think, comes from the authority figure being seen trying to do good, as opposed to the more standard of the authority figure shutting everything down.
I like that. Technically, he shouldn't have sworn them in, so to speak, right? I mean,
well, he should have a lot of questions, but I mean, I think, as an audience, I choose to believe that he sees something between them, and knowing that he doesn't speak Chinese and it's like, and again, I'm assuming if it's not Chinese, just please correct me. But
It is.
he doesn't speak the language, and being willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, and that's a refreshing and pleasant thing to chuckle along with.
He let it go. I mean, he's also the best stand-up comedian, right? Because it's clearly hilarious, but he doesn't laugh.
No.
And just, okay, till then, fine. That's kind of in the vow.
It's close enough. Close enough.
So my reading is she inadvertently sabotages the vow and kind of deconstructs the heterosexual marriage as social institution, because in butchering the vow, that's what she's doing through different accent, of course. But so if you read it that way, the failed communication, language barrier, the accents, it's kind of doing something interesting politically, even if it's unintended by the character, but you can read it that way. So so moving from accents to embodiment, to body. The film Ex Machina is really interesting. So this is not an Asian film. Ex Machina is built under the conceit of somebody has built really advanced AI. It's Android, right? And it looks and feels completely human. But what's so problematic is that this genius inventor, nestled deep in the mountains, he creates androids one after another, and they all happen to be female. Among them is a Japanese one, an Asian female android whose name is Kyoko. She's not given language function. So there's not even like different accents to speak of. So this is what the scene looks like, and Kyoko is there to serve. She delivers breakfast. So by the way, he's brought in to do the Turing test. The Turing test is one that tries to determine if a human can tell that it's an AI and not human, right? To test another android. And here he's being woken up in his room by Kyoko.
Hey, man. Good morning. Good morning. Sorry to send Kyoko to wake you, but I didn't want too much of the day to slip by.
Yeah, no, I know. It was a good thing. Thanks.
She's some alarm clock, huh? Gets you right up in the morning. So, day 2, you ready?
So the genius inventor makes this remark about Kyoko. Her function is to serve and to, quote, get you right up every morning. It's a combination of racism and misogyny. But the next clip, even more interesting.
Kyoko. Kyoko. Where's Nathan? Where's Nathan? Jesus Christ, you really don't speak a word of it. What the fuck? Oh, no. Stop. No, don't do that. Don't do that. You don't have to do that. What are you doing?
I told you you're wasting your time talking to her. However, you would not be wasting your time if you were dancing with her.
Scantily dressed, the android is programmed to cook, to serve. When a man comes near, she would start undressing or dancing if music is played. Clearly, it's a high-profile film. It's not a comfortable thing to watch, but I thought it's even though it's sci-fi, the characters are not human. But I think it does betray a lot of the habitual thinking, particularly about Asian women and their roles in society. So that's what came to my attention. How about you? What else did you pick up in scenes like that? So the android is programmed without language function. So Melissa, you surely know the film.
Yeah. This, I mean, it's so blatant in your face that she's not even given a voice, literally denied a voice by just not being programmed. Right. I mean, she is literally an object. So she is objectified because she's an object. And perhaps, yeah, I mean, it goes back also in the history of Hollywood, obviously showing Asian, especially East Asian women, right? East Asian women as the only objects, voiceless objects that don't talk back. And again, yellow fever feeds into this perception as well. Obviously, that's the reason you would program a droid like that with literally no voice. And it reminds me of the Japanese film Air Doll a lot, which is Koreeda's film, a Koreeda film that most people have never even heard of. But yeah, I mean, she's a sex doll who comes to life and like lives a life. And eventually, like the man doesn't want her to come to life. The man wants a doll. And that's, I mean, sorry to ruin that film, but that is exactly, I mean, he wants the doll. So interesting, even in some of that's a Japanese commentary on sort of post-economic bubble relationships and the lack of societal relationships, and particularly misogyny connected to that. So I think that's a really interesting idea. Obviously, Ex Machina does it from an other perspective, and Koreeda does it from an internal Japanese perspective. But it's the same idea of wanting the female voiceless and essentially lifeless.
And so convenient. I'm so glad you brought up the Japanese film history. This is not to exonerate Asian artists, Asian filmmakers. A lot of the Japanese film, even the Japanese subculture itself, is deeply misogynistic. So I suppose racism, misogyny really has no race or gender. Anyone can unconsciously participate in any of this. What we see in the example Melissa mentioned, but also Ex Machina, is the dual narrative of Asian women as idealized dolls, but also prostitutes. And if they're prostitutes and subhuman, they're less valuable. So you can objectify them and not treat them with respect. So in the film, obviously, it's not an accident especially it's a sci-fi film. In a lot of sci-fi films, think Ghost in the Shell, for example, the use of female Asian bodies, even if purportedly they would say this is just sci-fi, right? So can get away with that. I'll make a little detour. As I said, it's interactive. It depends on our interaction, which direction we might go. So sci-fi, especially dystopian sci-fi. Did you notice that there are actually very strong Asian motifs in all of this? The most famous is Blade Runner, a future Los Angeles with that is Asian inflected. Look at all the neon signs. You think you're in Japan, but it's not alone. Food, for example, preferred food in the film Blade Runner is ramen. And here you can see the main character with a ramen chef. The Fifth Element, that's a feature film. The New York's future clearly lies in some kind of Hong Kong inflected transportation, that ship, for example, straight out of Hong Kong harbor, as well as architecture. So very strong Asian motifs, and particularly female Asian android bodies feature strongly in all of these dystopian futuristic sci-fi. In the TV series Outer Carbon, they have this Bay City. Again, it borrows strongly from the Hong Kong landscape. And in the film Big Hero 6, you have blatantly a place called San Francisco. So the imagination used to be that, I think particularly, it's very particular East Asian cities, Hong Kong, sometimes Shanghai, but primarily Hong Kong and Tokyo. They're imagined to be sleek and clean and somewhat futuristic, and that is why a lot of the sci-fi films and cartoons, they always go there for inspiration. And just these screenshots will show you the persistence of using Asian motifs, but not really engaging with Asian culture. So this is a Polish video game called Cyberpunk 2077 in the Night City. Again, it says open 24 hours toward the bottom. That's Hong Kong cityscape. So these are just some of the examples of how Asian themes show up unexpectedly in other places. Obviously, we cannot not talk about Minari. Minari is the film where the actress for the grandma won the Oscar this year. And in this scene, I wanted to show the complexity of racism. It's never one-sided.
Hey, can you stop me if I say something in your language?
Sure.
Chinga chinga chong chima chima chu?
Why is your face so flat?
It isn't.
My name is Johnny. What's yours?
David?
Nice to meet you, David. Hey, David.
Lo, bomo, como, lomo?
Oh, como. That means aunt in Korean.
That is so neat.
Come sit with us.
So, thoughts? Oh, feel free to use the text chat as well, if you're so inclined. Regardless of whether you know Minari, the film, what comes up in the clip? So, Michael, you've seen the film?
Yeah, well, I've seen it. And in the context, I mean, this is taking place in a church setting. And I mean, you've got the obvious over the top kind of, language thing, and but there again in that scene, and again as an old white guy, there's a certain sweetness in that you're showing kids, so there's an innocence about it. B, there's no threat of physical violence, which right there is a very good thing. And then you see, oh, they're actually trying to connect in some way. And then the young boy and David become very good friends later in the film. So it's to me, it's showing that there is some sort of positive possibility that can come out of even initial misconceptions or misunderstandings if you're truly open and open-hearted.
Yeah, I think children as the main characters here, they do change the dynamic. Fan, yes.
Yeah, what I thought was really interesting is the heuristics that are being used. So these children can't really conceptualize these bias heuristics that they're using.
Or the wrong word to say, right? Yeah.
They don't understand the systemic like the whole behind all this. They have no idea that like the context. All they have is that they're just acting out behaviors that they learn. And I think it's sort of watching the chat, and we're kind of watching them by watching these children, we're almost watching sort of how society views these things already, because how it teaches people in general. And that's why it's so interesting to watch them, because it is a reflection on us as well, and sort of the practices that we allow for it to be that influential on these very still tiny little minds.
It's both a sweet scene and a little bit horrifying, right? Such a young kid already internalized all this. Where would they get this from? Obviously. But on the other hand, did you catch the fat shaming? So that's a grandma and her daughter. So Brian?
Oh, I was gonna bring up
Yes.
a different point, not about the fat shaming. I was just
Okay,
gonna say that
yes.
I was surprised that the girl character, the Asian girl character, just complied with the game, the really messed up game, and didn't say anything. And I thought, well, I don't know. I mean, I was kind of like rooting for like her like to like give like a 10-second spiel about like how bad this was. Obviously, it's not going to happen because they're kids, but just like how she just so willingly complied, and also, I mean, unquestioningly too, just like, yeah, I will see if I could find a word in your really messed up premise. Anyways, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Ben, yes, you're back.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of what Brian said. I think we all do to an extent. So I've been living in different countries for like the past 3 years. I don't even live in one place. And no matter where I go, I get misidentified. Like people would just be like, "Are you Thai?" Like that'll be like a question that people would just ask me. And I also comply with this, right? I'm like, and I don't go like, because it's so normalized in your everyday life where you're with these, sometimes strangers or just people you meet, it's really awkward to just be like, well, I can't believe you're saying this. Yeah. And then you just go about your day. For the sake of your own sanity, you have to do this. But it's really weird that the onus is on sort of minorities to do this type of work of almost diffusing situations of conflict in order to like make it more palatable or make their lives more like, I don't know, easygoing, so that you don't have a sense of rage everywhere you go.
Exactly. You have such a great point. Just like the characters, right? We all play along, play nice, play the game just to save our sanity. There's so much going on. Every single incident, when it's so prevalent, you just cannot. You don't have the resources to deal with all that, and that's the fundamental tragedy here. But also the onus of communication of educating others always falling on the minorities. Remember the clip from Falling Down? The white character will abusing the Korean shopkeeper, and of course lumping Chinese and Koreans all together. You are all the same. It's the onus of educating people like this, of course, always falls on the minorities. But also your point about the misidentity, I can very much relate to that. Being from Taiwan, people always confuse Taiwan and Thailand. They've never heard of Taiwan. Now people have heard of it because the chip shortage, 80% of chips in the world are made on that little island. Finally, they said, oh, there's this thing called Taiwan. But for a long time, before moving to DC, that's always a question. So where are you from? Taiwan? Do you mean Thailand? There's also the question of where are you really from, right? Not Washington, DC, couldn't possibly be Washington, DC. Like where did you, from which hole did you move from? So very much that as well. And the confusion of the locations. Washington DC a bit better because people are just so tuned into international affairs. So more people know about Taiwan, even before the chip crisis. But speaking of kids, how about this thing? This is from TV series. I don't know, some of you may know, Fresh Off the Boat. They cleverly repurposed and took ownership of a slur, right? Fresh off the boat, Wasabi is actually a slur, but they kind of turn around to portray a Taiwanese American family's adventure.
Come sit with us. Oh, what is this? It's Chinese food. Get it out of here. Ying Ming's eating worms.
I need white people lunch.
What is this store so excited about?
If we get separated, try and join a white family. You will be safe there until I can find you.
I miss the Taiwanese markets back in DC. They make me feel so calm.
Come sit with.
What do you think of this one? It's meant to be comedic, right? It's parodying a lot of stereotypes, including those coming from Asian characters themselves.
I kind of want to harp on some of what the discussion was talking about, but I think in that scene you kind of do see a sense of erasure, right? Because you really do, as the comments are saying, you kind of do want to fit into this homogenous culture or like dominant culture per se. And so coming from your own like very marginal culture, especially with food, I think food is so central to identity, and to sort of erase that one thing that really cores, like it's like a core a person's identity, is really like saying a lot, right?
Yeah. And again, it's the kids, right? They're both cute, but also unaware of how tragic it is. She declares, I want white people lunch. I need this because I can't be ridiculed in school. And so they go to this supermarket for white people lunch. And part of the parody, of course, the Taiwanese mom, she's ridiculing it. She said, what is this strange place? And she prefers the Taiwanese market, which in her description is much more calm. And then we cut to a scene of the absolutely chaotic kind of yelling. So a lot of stereotyping from all sides. And thank you, Michael, for bringing up the metaphor of self-erasure. That kind of echoes what we've been saying before in our real life experience, as well as those films. And so from there, we can move on to maybe consider class. So we talked about gender, the intersections, but also class is such an important factor. And some films imagine that class, if you are the right social class, you could solve racism.
What are your superpowers again? I'm rich.
But not everyone is Batman, almost. So Crazy Rich Asian. Right?
We're fully booked, madam. You must have made a mistake. I'm sure you and your lovely family can find other accommodation. May I suggest you explore Chinatown?
你自己 explore 寶區啦，死紅毛教。Please, may I use your phone to call my husband? It's the least you can do. Go right ahead.
You to leave, or I'll have to call the police.
Please, go right ahead.
Lord Caulthorpe, my apologies for the disturbance.
Eleanor, I've just got off the phone with your husband. Now, get the Lancaster suite ready now.
Surely you're joking, sir?
I assure you I'm not. As of this evening, my family's long history as custodians of the Caulthorpe is ended. I am selling the hotel to my dear friends, the Young family of Singapore. Meet the new lady of the house, Eleanor Young. Join me for a toast. We'd be delighted.
Do get them off. The floor's wet.
The film is doing a lot of things, and this scene as well. First, let's hear what Brian.
I never. Oh, sorry, I'll lower my hand. I never liked. I felt like I never liked that scene because it's like you can't like buy every hotel if there's an anti-Asian there's like an incident of anti-Asian racism. It's not like your way out is to just like, let's say like in the falling down incident where the Korean character can't just like buy his way out of the situation. And even for Eleanor Young, I feel like that's a one-time use card. I feel like you can't. I'm sure she experienced lots of incidents of racism. I'm sure in this one she like got like the best. I don't know, she like sort of like got the best smile that she could out of the incident. But like, how many times are you going to be able to do that or use that? Even if you are super rich, I'm sure there are incidents where you can't use that card out of the way to get out of that situation. And so I never liked that scene because it's so I don't know. It's just impossible to actually do.
It's a cheap, feel-good fairy tale moment, right? It portrays racism and then say that's the way out. But Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it was interesting watching it. What I thought about was not just like, well, this is a particularly rich family. I was thinking about the ways to which we think that moving through class, we can buy respectability. And then, but in this instance, it's so easy for her to do this. She's like, look, I got money. So even if like these people won't respect me, I will eventually be respectable. And the idea that somehow money can buy you that kind of like status. And it's a very individualist mindset, right? You work on an individual level to buy that respectability for your family, but you don't have to share it in a solidarity and like working with people that can change a huger, larger cultural problem that Brian's kind of mentioning.
There will be no solidarity between Eleanor Young and the Korean shopkeeper in Falling Down. Definitely not. That's not. And Michael.
No, I just felt, you know, it's one of those wish fulfillment scenes. The audience watching the film is not all going to be wealthy like that, but on the other hand, a certain number of them are going to be like rooting for, yay, we broke through. This is fantastic. What a great thing. They got their comeuppance, and look at the expression on the face of the guy who just told her to get lost. So I mean, it's that kind of thing. But I mean, that's a recurring motif for decades and decades, if not centuries, on stage and in film. I mean, there was a play on Broadway many years ago starring, I think, Helen Hayes or something, where I don't remember the title, but it's like she's come in and she's not being treated well by this corporation or a bank or something like that. And it turns out she's got all this money. And at the end of the act, you realize she's now bought the place up. And it's like, yay, you know, that shows them. So this is it's a recurring thing, but it's just a matter of how much of it is excitement in the moment and how much of it's going to be relatable long term.
Yeah, it doesn't propose any realistic solution to racism or strategies for inclusion. And the title itself, of course, it comes from the Singaporean writer's novel, Crazy Rich Asians. It's a form of pornography, right? A pornographic view for the majority of us into the life of the crazy rich, and they happen to be Asian. But I think all of you raised really relevant points here. What about the scene where when the couple makes it to Singapore, and all of the family, they are grilling. So this is internalized stereotypes, and the extended Singaporean family, they're trying to find out about Rachel Chu's background. Which Chu are you?
So you're not from a Taiwan Chu family?
Nope.
Hong Kong Telecom Chus?
No.
Malaysian packing peanut Chus?
Is that really a thing?
Yeah, it's everywhere.
I'm gonna stop you there because I'm gonna take her on the rounds. We'll be back though.
No, wait, hang on. China instant noodle Chus. Rachel, Chu are you?
So rather than who are you or Chu are you, what do you think that scene is doing? There's a related scene. Michael. Yes, Michael.
Oh, I just want again the old white guy talking here. It's like that kind of scene occurs in many other, you know, movies, and nothing to do with Asianness. It's all about class. It's like, oh, are you this, you know, the Smiths from this Tony place in New Hampshire? Are you the, you know, it's like there's this need on the socioeconomic level to connect with somebody and make them okay because you know that you're at a similar level, which means it's safe to be around them. They're not going to be hitting you up for money. They're not going to be making you feel bad about having it and spending it. It's that kind of thing.
It's classism, right? Are we the same class or same social circle and so on? But Fan, what do you think?
Yeah, what kind of is interesting to me about these, like some of these things are kind of, well, at least in Singapore, I think, and the movie pointed out, it's like a more old money. But there's this interesting thing about like some of these countries are industrializing very quickly, and it is new money that is going into these countries, and it's the ability to adopt capitalism so wholeheartedly and integrating it into culture and internalizing it when it wasn't there to begin with, right? So some of these societies, they don't have that sort of big class divide, but now after like a few decades, that's beginning to show and emerge. And I think that what Crazy Rich Asians kind of highlighting is this emerging class society in Asia. And it exists already, but like the fact that it's like so adopted for some places when it wasn't already there.
Yeah, yeah, and then the film indeed portrays old money, right? Because supposedly the family got rich, their business is real estate, so it's very much the old money. How about another thing? It also has to do with so many truths, but I think the theme is a bit different. So the couple is dating. This is Brooklyn, right? But word got out fast. I'm gonna pause right there. Wow, so many Rachel Chu's. Lot, complete with Singaporean English, with the particle ending. So, obviously, this film was a big deal because it was one of the first feature films with an all Asian cast. That went mainstream. Before this, we had, of course, Joy Luck Club and others, but this one seems to be specifically trying to connect a part of Asia with Asian America. And what I picked up here, different from the previous thing, is this stereotype of Asian Americans being a tight-knit community. Everyone's supposed to know everyone else, hence the mystery. But Michael, you might be able to tell us as well all the other stereotypes or a similar trope that you see in theater as well as film. But what do all of you think? Did you pick up something different from the previous, both things are all about, wow, there are so many Chus. Which one are you? Melissa, yes.
So I was gonna say, being from the West Coast is also a very different thing when we're dealing with Asian community and the history, obviously. And so I have a lot of their parents immigrated from mainland China, usually via Hong Kong or Taiwan. But this idea that on the East Coast, there's this group of East Asian immigrants, but on the West Coast, there's this bigger group of East Asian immigrants, and in the middle of the country, they're the East Asian immigrants who didn't have enough money to go to the coasts. So there's this really interesting sort of, that like in real life, at least, this impression, like I have a friend who's a filmmaker and she's like, yeah, we immigrated to Texas because only the rich Chinese people immigrated to California. And so my Chinese friends in California are like, they don't have any awareness that they're considered the rich Chinese immigrant family, but they are in LA at least fairly tight knit in certain social class arenas. So anyway, all of that to say that it did make me think about that interesting placement social class wise, and it's something that's very well known within their own communities, but that from the outside, before I had so many friends in that community, I couldn't see and I didn't know.
I think that is so true. So according to the latest data, the myth of Asian Americans as a model minority, that's actually the worst myth, where Asian American students are overrepresented. The scandal at Harvard, for example, admissions office, they're trying to tweak their, artificially tweaking the admission process. Actually, Asian Americans, statistically, among all minority groups, is the group with the largest income gap. So yes, there are the Eleanor Young types, but that's just the tip of the pyramid. And there are many who are not doing so well. Unlike Melissa, I wasn't knowledgeable about the income gap between Californian Asians versus Texan Asians, if there's some truth to that. But I think we need to confront the issue of class front and center and look at internal discrepancy of the whole group, right? Rather than constantly being misled by the myth of Asian Americans. At my school, for example, they have this scholarship, diversity fellowship. And it's never written, but it's tacitly understood by all. They never give it to Asian American students. They are just not eligible. It's always Black students. Granted, it's very important, but I think when you call something diversity fellowship and even use words like BIPOC, but specifically exclude a group of people in practice, it is simply wrong and unethical. So we have a lot of examples like this. People, administration, they see Asian American students, overachievers. They are well off. Financially, they don't need help. Those are the stereotypes, and frankly, it's a myth. So if you look scientifically at the stats, you will realize that's not the fact. Of course, all minority groups need help, but I think this kind of class-based myth is really harmful for a particular group, as we've seen in all these film clips. So we are coming to the end. I'm going to show a John Cho clip before moving on to the final section, which is based on the film Farewell. So John Cho in Searching. So Searching is not an Asian film, but it features an Korean American father whose daughter has gone missing. The whole film, most of the film involves him looking for his daughter.
Hello?
Hi, is this David Kim?
Yes, this is David Kim. I'm assuming this
Good morning, Mr. Kim. My name is Rosemary Vick. I'm the detective sergeant assigned to your daughter's case.
Yeah, good morning. I've been waiting for your call.
Of course, we're working as fast as we can. I'm currently 35 minutes away from your house, but while I have you, do you feel comfortable telling me what you know?
I just told every detail I know to whoever I got off the phone with an hour ago. I don't know what you guys are doing.
I promise you, Mr. Kim, we are taking this very seriously. And as a parent myself, I can only imagine what you must be feeling. But for me to help you, I do need to know how everything unfolded from your eyes.
Understood. Detective.
Okay, let's see if I got this right. 1. After a group study session, Margot with her car.
As the detective goes on the phone, you see the change. David Kim at one point decides, I think like in our discussion, decides to play along, right? Just to appease the institution. And meanwhile, he digs up, being so tech savvy and resourceful, digs up everything about the detective, right? And so the film, it's called Searching, and it features digital technology front and center, especially David Kim's mastery of that and interaction with it. Earlier, I think Brian mentioned, right, the association of Asianness with food, with food, but also accents as well as technology. I think this is a perfect example of that. Anything else you picked up here regarding the accidental Asian themes in a non-Asian American film? Granted, it has an Asian actor as in the lead, but the film itself, we can't say it really portrays Asian American situations. Michael?
I don't know, to me, it's well, I'm a dad. And so for me, immediately the overpowering thing is, oh my God, his kid is gone, and just really going along with his journey. And when he's like looking up the detective, to me, that was just like an immediate, even before he did that, I was like, is this a real detective he's talking to? And to see the doubt on his face and to see him take what I would deem at least the first step appropriate action. But again, I'm at the end of that sequence, I was still not convinced that he's talking to who she says she is. So I don't know the movie, but it could just be great. She picked the right name to get past that initial thing, and now they're off on this roller coaster ride. So I don't know, but my guard was still very up at the end of that. So when you say he consciously chooses to play along, I think that I mean, if I were doing that role, it would be, it would be, yes, I'm gonna, play you some line and see what you do with it. But it's like, I'm still gonna be on
I like
guard.
that. Oh, by the way, I should give a shout out to Michael Knapp. He's this wonderful editor. I had edited many of my works. He's based in New York, but actually also an actor, not just editing. So you do bring a unique perspective, and especially a film you don't actually know. So the scene, yes, it's suspicious. I suppose David Kim is right in not necessarily playing along, but maybe just trying to do his own investigation. Since the situation is tense, we don't know who's taken his daughter. Every character could be suspicious. But anything else?
In a lot of the scenes you're showing today, I mean, it's a question of who has the power in the scene,
right?
Or who thinks they have the power, or who maybe can tilt the balance of the power. And so I feel that's what's playing out in that scene as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about power relations, and some films more wishful thinking, right? They imagine we can solve the problem if you're Bruce Wayne and money solves the problem, except not really. So it goes down the rabbit hole of fairy tale. But Jung-woo, so he's making some waves, and I'm sorry, Jung Cho. There's actually a campaign, a hashtag starring Jung Cho, and they made a lot. They doctored a lot of film posters. I'm about to show them to you. So they changed they changed our film poster to feature Jung Cho. It's a campaign they're trying to call on the Hollywood studios to actually consider Asian actors seriously. This is an issue of self-representation, but above all else, just casting with an eye toward equality rather than saying we must have an Asian character in the script in order to cast an Asian actor. And I was mesmerized by all of these posters. This one's Me Before You, or James Bond. Can you imagine an Asian James Bond? Before I'm searching, Jung Cho was of the Star Trek fame. He's a secondary character. Or perhaps Jung Cho in Jurassic World, Heroic, or even the Avengers, an Asian Avenger, considered a possibility. Or London Has Fallen. So there are many, many more. So if you search that hashtag, it's out there. It's a campaign and people are serious about it. It doesn't have to be Jung Cho, but right, consider all the other possible eligible actors out there. Not just in Asian or Asian American films, but just films in general. But I think it's double-edged sword, right? Representation, we never wanted to mean you happen to be Black, so you would rap and do certain things. Good with drums, you're Asians, you would play a specific kind of role, so that's kind of typecasting. But in conclusion, Farewell is this recent film as well, won a lot of awards, and this one is a bit different from everything we have seen. So it's not gender and not class, not power dynamics, but rather what happens when Asian American characters, quote unquote, return to their homeland. Maybe it's a place they've never been, a place where they're supposed to be from. So here it's Awkwafina's character. She's second generation immigrant, is New Yorker, and goes to China because supposedly her grandma is dying and the whole family decides to lie to her, not to tell her the truth or else she would die. And all the Chinese characters she encountered, they are maybe it's an internalized kind of self-colonized mentality. Maybe it's just pure curiosity. They always ask her, so how are things in America? Is America really better than China? And some of it put it in a competitive tone. But I think it's an important theme, both in film and in our real life, in terms of the people who are in the diaspora, who exist between different cultural spaces, different linguistic spaces. When they move around, they are neither here nor there. Neither place would say, you belong here.
那你父亲在美国是做什么的呢？
他是翻译。
啊
有没有水喝的水？
啊，有，可以用这个烧水壶烧。
OK， 可以。谢谢，好。OK， 谢谢。
哎，你觉得在哪里更好？中国还是美国？
不一样。
啊，那怎么会不一样呢？肯定是在美国会更好些吧？
就是不一样。
我觉得你肯定更习惯在美国的生活。
可能。可能。
行，有什么事再叫我。
OK， 谢谢。
So that's Awkwafina. Her character is really charming. Awkwafina was in Crazy Rich Asian, was a secondary character there, but here she's the main character, and I was struck by the accent. So she speaks Mandarin Chinese with a strong American accent because it's actually not her native tongue. And we have a similar dynamic at a dinner scene. That's grandma to our left. So again, the relatives, they get together for dinner, but the topic invariably becomes China versus America.
哎，比利啊，有没有想过搬回国来？现在可多老外都来淘金了。
在美国要多长时间才能挣上100万美金啊？
很长时间。
真的假的？在中国都是分分钟的事儿啊。
可不呗。
生活不只是钱，钱买不了很多东西。
这有钱也不碍事儿啊。有钱也可以享受用钱买不到的东西，对吧？
那如果在国内这么好赚钱，干嘛还琢磨把宝送到美国读书啊？
这样机会多嘛。
啥机会啊？说不定他去了美国，就跟我们家 Billy 一样，对钱不感兴趣了。他只在乎自己想做的事儿。
你们也不用太担心，等 Billy 成了有名的作家，那就挣大钱了。现在就等于在为他的天赋投资嘛。
是，养孩子就跟玩股票似的。
Oops, sorry.
拿了把钥匙，就跟我。
Mom, that church is not representative of all America. We have a lot of problems: guns, healthcare.
If you think China that.
So the mom boasts about how good the church has been to them, and Billy corrects her, of course, and reminding her and the Chinese relatives that there's actually a gun issue in America, among other things.
Why don't you move here?
中国人有中国人的好处啊。再说了，咱也不是一无是处，是吧？
那当然了，北京烤鸭就特别有贡献，对吧？
行了，再怎么着也不能说中国不好。别忘了，你们都是中国人。
我们现在应该算是美国人吧？我们拿的是美国护照吗？
我永远是中国人，不管住在哪儿，拿哪国的护照。
是啊，就算国外的月亮比中国圆，咱也得多为妈想想，是吧？父母在，不远行嘛。
As you can see, pretty tense. Hey, Melissa? Oh. I'm just reading your chat. Thank you so much for bringing this up. But I thought the scene is particularly tense given the US-China trade war and everything that has happened in the past 2 or 3 years. The Chinese Americans caught between two empires, caught between two different spaces. They are neither here nor there. The scene ends with grandma declaring you are all Chinese and you cannot criticize China. Your ethnicity trumps everything. Even if the father boldly says, technically we are American. So that's such an interesting and rich scene. I wonder if some of that resonates with some of you today in your life, as well as just other tropes that you have seen. And Brian?
Yeah, I feel like it's I don't know, I like thought of Crazy Rich Asians and being an Asian American and having to explain yourself abroad, especially in Asia, is
not just here, right? In Asia as well.
Right. And
like that.
I don't know, for Crazy Rich Asians, my thought was I was surprised by the lack of solidarity between the different, like the Asian community that Rachel was entering. And they're sort of like, oh, are you like X, are you like this Rachel Chu, are you that Rachel Chu? And sort of like having their own social hierarchy and not sort of like embracing her as sort of like, I guess, like part of their community or anything, because she's Asian American. And then same here, like the main actor's character, Awkwafina's character, whose name I forget, her Asian American identity is being like characterized by different people who aren't her, and people are putting words in her mouth. And so like the mom, the hotel person who's like, oh, well, you must like America better, you must be more used to it, right? And the mom saying like, oh, like Awkwafina's character has all these wonderful experiences, etc. And so I don't have like a clear thought, it's not linear, but it's just, I don't know, like Awkwafina's character and Rachel Chu as Asian Americans, it's like they have to deal with like just so many interesting contextual dynamics in Asia. And
thank you for linking the two together. That is so rich, and I think it's forceful exposure of coming clean. Which one are you? Choose a side. Is all of that, whether in the U.S. or in Asia, and we see the dilemma of these characters. Thank.
I kind of want to harp on that thought as well. I don't think it's just Asia, because I live in Europe, and I kind of had this where I entered a room Asian, and then when I say I'm American, I stop being Asian all of a sudden, and then just become American. And I don't know, I almost feel it's a weird thing, like almost like a magic trick that happens whenever I meet someone. It becomes like, oh, like I walk on the street and someone might yell something kind of racist to me about being Vietnamese, and then I'm Asian there. But then when I talk to Europeans and they realize I'm from America, all of a sudden it's over. Like you're no longer Vietnamese. It's, you enter the room Vietnamese and you leave the room American. And I don't know how that happened, but it does happen a lot for me, and it messes me up. I'll be honest, like I feel very messed up by it. And I think what that highlights is not just the Asian experience, but like diaspora that are borderlands. So there's been a lot of discussion about borderlands recently. And diasporas that exist within these borderlands have this problem, right? Because you're not, it's almost like a purity problem. Like you don't have a sort of a claim to either country. And so you exist without a country, and that like sort of ambiguity makes people really annoyed. So they choose you, kind of like what Brian said. People choose for you, and as you keep moving around, everyone keeps choosing for you, and you have no choice in any of it. And there's like a sense of like no autonomy in any of these things. You're just like existing, and people get to tell you what you are at all different times of your life.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Melissa, as well. I think so. Race signifies differently, right, in different geographical locations. And as Melissa reminds us, Asian in England really primarily actually have the term black and brown. It refers to people of Indian heritage as colonial legacy, right? By Asian, they never think East Asian. So East Asian people are actually invisible there a lot of the time, most of the time. Ting, you have something to say.
Yeah, it's just I think the competition piece resonated with me the most in the film. I think a lot of time it's like maybe it's a Chinese thing, but we compare our style or quality of life to each other a lot, even within family settings, like between siblings. I see that a lot in my own aunts, where they do a lot of humble brags about how their own children are treating them and their successes in life. And I think when it becomes like a part where you're living in different countries, the wealth of the country become a part that you kind of integrate into your own view of success, where because America is associated with higher technological advancement and freedom of choice, you like see that as part of your identity, even though a lot of times Asian Americans who are first generation or immigrated when they're older still hold a lot of Chinese beliefs in terms of how they view the American dream. So that's like based on my own observations.
Thank you so much. I think you speak for many of us as well as relating to the clips. the constant pressure to justify yourself, to come clean, identify yourself, justify yourself, and also tacit competition among people living in different locations, who has made it, which side is better. And in the clip we just watched, how much time does it take to make $1 million? That's the benchmark for success, nothing else. It's quite simplistic, binary, but actually I've seen that play out in real life too. So it's not just film exaggerating right there. I'm going to wrap this up, but I wanted to give people some voice. Pledge of Allegiance. That is such a quintessential American experience. And I wonder what these scenes tell us about that, right? You see characters being forced to metaphorically kind of repledge their allegiance, whether to China in a case of farewell, or to the US, to say that they are worthy of institution. You see that pledge in the US immigration process, in the immigration test, as well as the final when you're sworn in. So very much kind of declaration of now you are a subject of the United States, or and you would actually, I think the language remains today, I'll quote, abandon, you would not serve another foreign prince. That's the language. Michael Sanger, you would know this. So before we move on, and thank you for your contribution to the chat. I wonder if Michael Sanger, you want to speak about the Jewish experience in relation to diaspora, also the in-betweenness that we've just seen.
Sure. I definitely think that one of the things I can most clearly relate to is the aspect of being invisible, because one of you mentioned the idea of entering a room Asian and then becoming American, and that resonated very strongly with me. That I, if I'm in a social environment, I will be assumed in Texas to be white and normative, and then which church do you go to? Well, I don't. Then suddenly it's like everyone changes. You feel the entire room actually changing, right? And you've suddenly become the Jew, right? So it's definitely something I can relate to.
Thank you for offering this parallel experience. And certainly Texas hasn't been an easy place for any kind of minority. So in conclusion, going forward, may I suggest that we watch more foreign language films, whether it's your habit or not, and understand subtitles can really be a barrier. I believe Bong Joon-ho, when he won the Oscar for Parasite, he said he finally transcended the 2-inch barrier of the subtitles. That's actually the first foreign film to win the Oscar. There are a lot of gems out there. So there's Hollywood, there's Bollywood, but few people know that Hong Kong cinema is actually the world's 3rd largest film industry in terms of influence. And foreign language films, they give us non-Western modes of storytelling. Parasite, for example, has a tonal blend of comedy, horror, tragedy, and even lyrical elements. Some people even use the word Shakespearean to describe this film, right? Because it's so outlandish. It's something that doesn't jive with contemporary American narrative modes. So they kind of reach back, what they can think of is Shakespearean. It's from a different era. But it has its benefit, right? So that we don't always experience stories in one particular way. And of course, with all of diversity of films, of stories, we can see more the internal diversity within minority communities. And that's actually very useful going forward for our own life and the collective fight we are doing. And thank you, Melissa, for giving examples of some of the excellent film directors to discover from Hong Kong, but also other influences that some people rarely think of unless you happen to do this for a living. There's the choreography, you know, even for films like Matrix, heavy influence from Hong Kong and martial arts and all of these. They just work in Hollywood, not as recognized. But the influence is there. It doesn't have to be films or directors per se, but just something to think about. So not just or films with Asian themes and characters, but that don't advertise themselves as an Asian film, right? Rewatch Ex Machina, and then think about how they portray Asian female bodies, all of those. And thank you, Iman. Do you want to say a few words? And thank you for joining us. Iman is an expert in Asian cinema.
Thank you, Alexa, and thank you, everybody. I'm so sorry I came in really toward the end
No
of
worries.
Yeah, but I was really struck by the clip that you played from Farewell around the dinner table, right? It's such a, I just found it so intriguing because it's such a travesty of the Chinese convention of the dinner table where it's supposed to be everything is harmonious and intergenerational communication. Here, what you have is everything falling apart, right? And the accent plays such an important role, right? Because as you said, Aquafana's Chinese, Mandarin Chinese is so accented. So, and not only that, she is not able to hear the subtext, right? So when the family relatives ask her, oh, how long does it take to make 1 million in the US? She responds like, you know, in a factual way, oh, very long time. And then she says, money doesn't buy a lot of things, right? So she answers, she doesn't really tune into the subtext because she doesn't really have that kind of cultural kind of familiarity with the Chinese way of insinuating, like microaggressive kind of insinuation, right? So then it takes the mom, who is an outsider, right? She's a daughter-in-law, her marital relationship is not going well, and she and the grandma has something going on, right? So the mom is quite an outsider in the family, but she is very, versatile with both cultures and languages. So it takes her to go tit for tat to, call out the family relative by saying, well, doing all this kind of a verbal sparring, right? So I found that really intriguing that the whole scene, the tension plays out on the linguistic level, but also this kind of sublinguistic, cultural, high cultural, low cultural, that kind of it's just so. In some ways, I think the collaboration between Lulu Wang, the director who is from Beijing, she knows a lot about Chinese culture and the Chinese ways of microaggression, and Awkwafina, who is from America, and she doesn't. I think the collaboration between them really so nicely replicates and conduces to the kind of tension that she wants in the narrative.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful and really rich. Thank you for helping us wrap up all of these. And the subtleties I really appreciate. What we do need to take into account is for most American audiences, as they watch a film like Farewell, there's a lot of reliance on subtitles, right? And so the subtleties that Iman mentioned would not necessarily come through. Subtitles are heuristic, but also it actually glosses over a lot of things, making things smooth. And it's well known that they will sometimes gloss over curse words and anything undesirable. So again, the space between languages, but I think it's a beautiful space. We should work with it rather than work out of it. Just that space in between. So any final questions, comments? All right. I'm going to hand back to Fan just to wrap up. Fan.
Yeah, thank you for coming out to this event. It was really lovely. I had a really wonderful time going through all the cinematic clips because I'm really a big. I used to go to the theater like every week, and I grew up watching a lot of Hong Kongese film, but like dubbed in Vietnamese. So like for me, this was really fun to do, and like the discussion was really great and lovely. Maybe we should give a round of applause for our speaker today.
Thank you.